the room.
Okay, we're on the air. We'll call this meeting of the September 3rd Salina Planning Commission to order. Margie, can you confirm that we have met the requirements of the Kansas Open Meetings Act?
Yes, I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice of the meeting was provided.
Thank you. Dean, roll call.
We'll go ahead and call the roll. Commissioner Sydow.
Here.
Commissioner Van Covern.
Here.
Commissioner Alt.
Here.
Commissioner Farber.
Here.
Commissioner Rogers.
Here.
Commissioner Paget.
Here.
Commissioner Waters.
Here.
Chair Mike Sell.
Here.
So that gives us a full attendance of all 8 appointed members are present, and so we can conduct today's meeting agenda.
Very good. Okay, I hope you've all had enough time to read the minutes of the August 20th meeting. And if you have any changes to the minutes, or if you think that they're okay, go ahead and make a motion to approve as accepted.
I'd move that we approve the minutes of the August 20th meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the August 20 regular meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. New business.
So we have no public hearing items for today, and we have no quasi-judicial or legislative matters to discuss. And rather than scheduling a separate study session and have everybody come in early, we were just going to use today's meeting to go over commissioner orientation and training and the role and responsibility of Planning Commission. Most of you are carrying on, but some of you have different degrees of experience on the commission, have been exposed to certain things and not other things. So we're just going to do a refresher that the City Commission, who appoints people to these advisory bodies, has asked us to undertake with all of our commission members, both new and experienced. So the first thing we're going to do is just discuss an overview of the orientation of our boards and how we serve. And so the most important thing is that you will receive notification. Either you will receive an agenda or you will receive a notice of meeting cancellation on that Thursday or Friday before the scheduled meeting. So if for some reason we're not going to meet because there's lack of agenda items, we will notify the board. So if you want to go ahead and move forward, Gage. So I think you know who all the staff is that you're working with, but Margie is pinch hitting for Daisy, and Dustin Hers is otherwise detained, and Dustin Michelson is not here, which leaves myself and Gage Roberts, who is our newest planner and is a recent graduate of the Kansas State University Master's Program and a native of Salina. And so that constitutes the staff that you will be working with in this upcoming year. So I think one thing that's not always clear is how planning and everything fits into the wider organization. So the city has a number of departments, and I haven't done it recently, but in the past I have taught a planning administration class at Kansas State, and there's a surprising number of students in the planning curriculum that don't understand that planning is just one department or one piece of a larger area. And so the Community Development Services Department is what planning is under, but we certainly, as it relates to items that come before you, we have involvement from the city manager and city attorneys office. We work with finance and administration on capital improvements. We work with the fire department on fire access and fire flows to development. We work with Parks and Recreation if there is parkland involved. We'll work with Public Works and engineering and certainly utilities in the things that come before you. So a lot of times the staff reports that you get and summarizing the information, we are pulling those comments and we're pulling those items from those other departments, even though they're not necessarily here at the meeting. So there's all those departments, and then there's a number of organizations that are partners with the city that the city supports in some way, and we interact with them and coordinate with them as well on a number of issues. So you can go ahead. And then I think the other thing is, for a community Salina's size, we have a lot of boards and commissions, and that's a lot of spots to fill with volunteers. And so everybody has their own interest and their own niche, but all of these boards that we have listed there are all staffed by residents of Salina who want to be involved and serve in some capacity. And so just within the planning division, we support the work of the Board of Zoning Appeals that Carla currently sits on, and we work with the Heritage Commission that Mr. Sydow currently sits on. We have the Planning Commission, and then we have the Salina Business Improvement District Design Review Board. So planning staff, there have been times when planning staff has been at a city commission meeting Monday, a planning commission meeting Tuesday, a heritage commission meeting Wednesday, and a Board of Zoning Appeals on Thursday. And so we're staffing the work of all those boards. So it's not an excuse, but sometimes if we appear to be distracted, sometimes we have to stop and remember which board we're presenting to. So, and this is extremely hard to read, but this is our organizational chart, and the citizens are at the top. They are the major customer for the city of Salina, and then we are all accountable to the elected city commission, including the city manager, who serves at the pleasure of the city commission, and then all the departments that are organized under that. But community and development services is in one of those boxes, and we have building services that deals with building codes, neighborhood services that deals with neighborhood code enforcement, tall weeds and grass, dilapidated buildings, things of that nature. We have planning and zoning, and then we have community relations that deals with human relations and with equal opportunity employment situations, housing, discrimination cases, things of that nature. And so it's a pretty diverse group, and there you can see it there specifically. But the planning and zoning consists of myself, Dustin Hers, Dustin Michelson, and Gage, who is here. And then we have all the staff that's under building services. We have Margie, who serves as deputy director and pinch hits where needed. And then we have community relations, and then a group of administrative assistants that help everything keep running. And so that's how this fits in. But if we look at it as a department, we're working with plating, we're working with zoning regulations, land use, floodplain administration, our comprehensive plan. We're enforcing building codes, we're enforcing property maintenance codes, we're looking at allegations relating to discrimination in employment and public accommodations. We're providing customer service through our administrative staff. And then we have what we call is a development review team, and that development review team is made up of members of all the city departments. So oftentimes we'll take the example of the Airport Authority's project out on Waterwell Road. They would come in and they would meet with the city's development review team while it's just a project in their thoughts, and said, this is what we're thinking of at this corner, what do we know, what do we not know, and we get input from all the city departments as to utilities, fire protection, drainage, all those things before applications are ever filed to come before this board. And so this is just a calendar of when they meet, but I talked to the planners about what I call the rhythm of the week, but I know when I come in on Mondays, whether it's the first week of the month, the second week of the month, the third week of the month, so it's just been ingrained in me that this is a planning commission week, this is a Board of Zoning Appeals week, and so that just becomes part of the rhythm of what we do things. But there might be a Friday where we might have 3 different board packets going out to boards and commissions, and so just so you know, you're not the only commission that we work with. So,
But you like us the best, though, right?
yeah, well, you were at the top of the list. So.
Today.
So one of the things that is important to city commissioners is they want to appoint members who are going to serve and be active. So their attendance is important to them, attending and being active. We had 2, I think last August, that we had 2 members of Planning Commission who submitted expression of interest forms, and they were appointed, and then in response to being appointed, they said, well, I never wanted to be on the Planning Commission, and so they did not serve, but we've also had people be appointed that never came to a single meeting. So if after 3, if someone's appointed and they never come to a meeting, then we report back to the city commission and mayor, and they get removed. But the city commission has adopted rules and procedures for conducting boards and commissions, and they regardless of which board or commission it is, they want some consistent things, and so they want agenda packets. They want people to read their agenda packets. They want board members who will listen, are willing to listen, who are willing to ask questions, and they want board members who will exercise their independent judgment. We might make recommendations, we might indicate where staff's preferences lie, but the bottom line is that board and commission members should exercise their own independent judgment when they're faced with a question. So,
Excuse me, that says 66% in this information we have here, the bylaws, it says 75% attendance.
that is the bylaws are older than this, and those procedures were dropped, or those were adopted later, and so we'll go by what the city commission
Okay.
goes by. But there's a difference between just missing meetings, and I've got a family member who's in the hospital, or I've got a planned vacation to France or something like that. That's not considered to be an unexcused. 3 unexcused absences is we send out a packet, we don't hear from you, you don't come, you don't say why you couldn't come, you don't tell us ahead of time you weren't coming. And so that's the thing that we're concerned about from an attendance standpoint, because there's just nothing worse than, and I think our most recent experience was with the downtown board of, or design review board, and we had 3 items that were applied for. We sent our packet out, and we simply couldn't get a quorum to the meeting. And when we had scheduled all that, we didn't know at the time that we didn't have a quorum who could attend that meeting. We simply didn't have advance notice. So anytime that you know you're going to be gone, or you have a planned vacation or something like that, if you can let Daisy or a staff member know, and then we get enough of those that we know that we're not going to have the attendance, and we don't even try to schedule anything. But we just literally had to take that agenda and move it to a future meeting, because if you don't have a quorum, you're not really meeting, and you can't even table or discuss or anything because you don't have a quorum to do anything. So it's just a non-meeting. So they want their board members to attend, listen, engage, and ask questions. They want their youth liaisons, when we have them, to do the same thing. We've had situations, and it's okay for youth members to vote. Their votes aren't binding. In other words, if a youth member votes, it doesn't count towards whether the question prevails or not. But they're here to listen and participate and share their views when they're there.
Have we had any interest recently?
Well, we did have a youth member that was appointed for the Planning Commission, and I don't believe we've heard from them. So, but there was a youth member that was appointed for the Planning Commission, but we have not heard any feedback when we reached out to them.
Excuse me. So when the youth member is appointed, do they express an interest, or are they just appointed? They express an interest?
They would have submitted an expression of interest form and then been selected by the mayor to serve on one of the boards. We've had youth members on all of our boards except for the Downtown Design Review Board, but the Heritage Commission's had youth members, the Board of Zoning Appeals has had youth members, Planning Commission has. I think at one time, Planning Commission had 2 youth members.
That was when we were talking about tattoo parlors, and
yeah,
they had good input.
Yeah, so it's all about if there's multiple youth members that want to participate, they can be accommodated. One of the things that we discuss, and we have, it's on the face of your agendas here under public hearing items, but the applicant or an appointed representative must be present in order for the Planning Commission to take action on an item. There'll be some things that we might bring to you for discussion or input or other things where there's not technically an applicant, but when there is an applicant, they need to come or send a representative and to be available to answer questions. And that's for 2 reasons. One, staff is not the applicant's representative or advocate. And 2, if they're not here and you ask staff the question, and we may give you what we think the answer is, and then the applicant may not agree with our answer. So it's best if the applicant is present to answer questions directly from members of boards and commissions, providing extra information that we can't put everything in the packet. Even though it seems like we do sometimes, we can't put everything in there, and so there's still things that need to be asked and answered. So, and then the public may participate in, if it's a public hearing item, and we want to encourage and welcome that participation. We have not had, and don't get out for our meetings, the the 3-minute shot clock that the city commission uses at their meetings, and we also don't. I'm aware of the city of Manhattan and the city of Lawrence. You have to sign up in advance to speak at a planning commission meeting, and we just haven't seen the need for that. And so when people ask, I say, well, we have chairs that run the meeting, we have chairs that have gavels, and we rely on the chair to run the meeting. And so speaking of which, we have the staff responsibilities is to get the agenda put together in a packet out to you. The chair is responsible for running the meeting, the conduct of the meeting, recognizing members and the board, and also the public to speak. We don't have many huge parliamentary procedure questions, but there are orders of business questions. Last week, Vice Chair Waters asked if we could reverse the order of the agenda items, which is perfectly within the discretion of the chair. We usually put them on, one, in the order that they've been filed, and two, if it's a public hearing item, we put that before administrative items. But it's within the chair's discretion to change the order of business if it makes sense to them and the board. So, and then obviously the chair may make motions, the chair can second motions, the chair can participate in debate, and they have the full responsibilities and rights of a member of the board. I know in the past we've had, based on your experience with Robert's Rules of Orders, we've had some people come on and says, well, the chair doesn't vote, right? I said, no, the chair always votes, and it doesn't just break ties or anything. It's the chair. And it's not ideal for a chair to make a motion, but if everybody's stuck and nobody wants to move anything forward, the chair is not precluded from making a motion or seconding a motion. And then the vice chair performs all the duties and assumes the responsibilities of the chair in their absence, like Carla did last meeting. So, and then you'll have to scroll up a little, Gage, because I can't read the bottom part.
Talks about.
Okay.
I can't scroll, but it talks about secretary. So, Dean, you serve as the secretary for the
That's right.
planning
So
commission.
I'm responsible for reviewing and preparing and reviewing all the minutes, keeping records for those things, and then my duties are spelled out in the bylaws, just like the others. And so I'm working with Daisy to keep the attendance records. And we'll cover this a little more at the end, but we'll cover it here because it has become important to the city commission, to citizens, and the city in 2017 adopted an ethics policy that applies to city commissioners, but also applies to all other board members and also to staff. And so the idea is to keep public confidence that everything is above board and in the public view, and that we have independent, fair, and impartial decision makers, and that we're promoting ethical conduct. And so the conflict of interest, I can pick on a past board member. We had a planning commission member named Dana Morse, who was the director of development for Blue Beacon Incorporated. And he had experience with planning and development, and he was a good planning commissioner. But if Blue Beacon had an application coming before the planning commission, that's his employer, and he has a direct conflict of interest. And so his responsibility in that situation is, I think I have a conflict. I'm going to recuse myself and step down and not be involved in this decision. And so sometimes there are borderline, that employer situations are pretty clear cut, and then there's other situations that are less clear cut. And so our main thing would be if there's any question about that, that you can get your packet and you can contact staff and say, I got a question. Do you perceive this as a conflict? I think we had one a few years ago where we had a planning commission member, and they said, 6 years ago I served on the board of trustees at Kansas Wesleyan, and now Kansas Wesleyan has a case. And I said, no, you're not serving on the board anymore. You used to serve, but you do not have a conflict. And so let's say, for Mr. Seidow's case, we had an application come before us by Evergy to build a substation or something. Since you are retired from Evergy, it might be worthwhile to disclose that you used to work for Evergy, but you would simply say, I used to work for Evergy, but I don't anymore, and I think I can make an unbiased decision in this case. And so that's not a conflict of interest. And then if you want to zip back a second, Gage, to the ex parte thing, which is it's the hardest thing to communicate, but the best analogy is if you think about juries in a court of law or jury tampering. They're just, if we have a pending case that's coming for the Planning Commission on a land use thing, and neighbors want to talk to you and give you their perspective, or corner you in a grocery store, or call you at home, or things like that, the best thing to do is to say you can't have a one-on-one conversation with that. If they have something they'd like to do, and put it in an email or a short note, and then send it to staff, and then staff can share it with all the commissioners. So the main thing is, for ex parte communication, is that there not be planning commissioners who have certain knowledge or have gone out and gained knowledge. So if you drive out to the site to look at the site before a meeting, drive out by yourself. Don't drive with the applicant. And have the applicant give you a tour of their property. So that would be the main situation, and it doesn't, an ex parte communication doesn't necessarily disqualify you, but it's just something that says, I had this unavoidable conversation in the grocery store and I couldn't get away, and I was told this, and this, and I just wanted to share that with the rest of the group so you all had the same information. Then you're not disqualified from participating. You're just sharing that information. And so you have noticed that we start every meeting by having the chair confirm that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided. So the main condition of that is that we have to publicly advertise when our boards are meeting, but there is, and the text is small, but down there at the bottom about the notice is required only when someone requests to receive notice of meetings. And so to me it's counterintuitive, but it's Kansas law. And so there's nothing that requires, in the Open Meetings Act, that requires general notice, such as publishing the agenda in the newspaper or posting it on the website. But if you are a citizen and you have requested to receive notice, and I don't know, Margie may know how many subscribers we have, but we have people who sign up to receive the Planning Commission packet every week. And if they've signed up to get the packet, we have to make sure that they get the packet, because if they don't get the packet, then we have been conducting a public meeting without meeting the Kansas Open Meetings Act. So even though we would post a sign on the property, and we've advertised something on the city's website, or in the past published something in the newspaper, even if we've done all those things and we don't get the packet out to people who've requested to receive notification, that is considered a violation of the Open Meetings Act.
212 people on the planning commission list.
Okay. So when the chair requests and Margie confirms that required notice has been properly provided, that means we have posted the packet to the 212 people who have requested to receive it. So you're a popular group.
Does the city commission members receive the planning commission packet automatically?
Yes, they're all put on the lists for all the different boards.
And then if you're a citizen, you can go to the city's website, and there's a spot for notification for any boards or commissions. So you could, if you wanted to know about all the, like I have it set on my email, I get notification about all the planning boards, just so I can verify that the other 200 and however many people receive notice as well. But you can do that. You can do like Salina downtown notices. Since the city's website serves as our public notice requirement in the last year, you can also receive notice of any public notices that go out, and you'll just receive an email notification that'll take you to the website where the packet will be posted.
Can you show us an example?
Yes, let me work on that.
Been on the website. I don't know.
So the other thing about the Kansas Open Meetings Act is anytime a majority of a quorum of the planning commission, a quorum is 5 and a majority of a quorum is 3. Anytime 3 or more planning commission members are gathered together, we have to provide notice of that. So I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a state planning conference in Wichita, and we had 6 Salina planning commissioners travel in a van together to Wichita to attend this planning commission conference. And so we had to post a notice of that meeting that said that the planning commission is having a meeting which consists of 6 planning commission members, but no official public business is being discussed. You weren't discussing agenda items, you weren't voting on things, you were simply writing in a van, but because there were 6 of the 9 commissioners, that was considered to be a meeting. So
okay, so I can show you. So this is mine, but what you'll do is you'll set up your email, so you'll log in, you'll have a username and password, and then you can go in and you can select notifications for everything you'd like to be notified about. So like I've marked Board of Zoning Appeals, Business Improvement District, City Commission, Downtown Ace District, Heritage Commission, Planning Commission, and public notices and legal publications. So then I don't have my email pulled up, but whenever something is posted under that specific thing, I receive an email that tells me a packet has been posted, and those can be found on our website. So like this is the city, if you click here, I'll use this as an example, but you'll be notified, and then it'll take you to Laserfish, which will provide, this would be the city commission packet, but it'll provide the packet for any meeting, or if it's for public notice, it'll take you to the public notice section of our website as well. So
Thank you.
yeah.
I get just the building advisory board one, just because some of that can pertain to what I do. And so most of the time I just read through it, and if there's nothing that affects that, then I don't. But most of the time, the building advisory board, they don't have a meeting for lack of agenda items. But But it's handy to know when they do.
So when we send things out, we send those out at the, just so that at people start of the term, so they understand that the Kansas Open Meetings Act, what that means, and some people call it the sunshine laws or sunshine. It's just so that people have confidence that the business is being conducted out in the open where everybody can witness it. So all of our boards can have a study session, which is a non-voting session like we're doing right now, a regular meeting where we have regular agenda items, the annual meeting, which is today following our discussion and orientation, and then we can have special meetings called by the chair with the consent of 2 members, provided that every member receives notice of that. And we've had, I can remember a case where we had out-of-town applicants, and I-70 was closed by a blizzard, and nobody could get here on Tuesday, and so we scheduled a special meeting for Wednesday when the next day they were able to get through on I-70 and meet. So we do have the ability to have meetings off the regular first and third Tuesday if the chair gets the consent of other members to schedule that.
I have a question real quick, going back to the van example that you used to go to Wichita. If I'm at Salina on tap October 5th and I see these members, it's just if we get into a grouping, best not to do it, right?
Best just to have one-on-one conversations, or not like, say, this is the planning commission table and we're going to have 6 planning commission meetings at this table. So it's just better to keep it to 1s and 2s. Again, it's just a casual meeting that's not anticipated, but sometimes you'll see, I saw one for last Friday that they were having a ribbon cutting out at K-State Salina for a project, and majority of the city commission was going to be there for the ribbon cutting, but they weren't just there to discuss city business. But nonetheless, it was disclosed that a majority of the city commission would be at that ribbon cutting. And so yours are far less than that, but that was just an example because we had 6 planning commissioners meeting and gathering together and traveling in a van. And so that under state law, that constitutes a meeting.
All right, Dean, you want to switch?
We're going to switch gears and just talk specifically about the planning commission. But just so everybody knows, I have the notebook in my office. I tell all the new planners that they can't do their job without having a copy of the Kansas Planning and Zoning Enabling Act, because most of what we do in terms of a process or providing notice and opportunity to be heard and all those things is spelled out in state statutes, and it's the state legislature that has provided for the establishment of planning commissions. So you are a creature of the state legislature that says that cities can have planning commissions. And so the statute only says that you have to have 5 or more members. Ours, because and a lot of people don't realize it, but for a long period in the 70s and 80s, we had a planning commission that had jurisdiction out 3 miles from the city limits. And so as a result, we have a requirement that 2 of our members live outside but within 3 miles of the city limits. And so in the county has a planning commission, and you can be a city resident on the county planning commission, but a majority of their membership has to be from rural members. Salina has historically had 9 members on the planning commission, which is why there's 9 seats up there at the dais, because the planning commission is the biggest city board that we have. We have 5 city commissioners and we have 9 planning commissioners, and so that's why that table is set up for 9. So there is no term spelled out by the statute. It's determined by the local governing body in, sometime around 1990, when a lot of the boards and commission things were reorganized. The city commission decided that planning commissioners and other commissioners should not be able to serve more than 2 consecutive 3-year terms. I had, at a conference, met a planning commissioner from Overland Park who'd been on the planning commission for 29 years consecutive, and so he really liked it. But they didn't have term limits, and so we actually have term limits on how long you can serve consecutively. You can go off the planning commission and come back on a year or 2 later if you're interested, but in terms of consecutive terms, it's 2 3-year terms. And we do have 2 places in Kansas where there's a planning commission, and that planning commission hears cases both inside the city limits and out in the county. So there's a Wichita, Sedgwick County Planning Commission, and it has 15 members. And they hear things in the city of Wichita and also out in Sedgwick County, the same in Lawrence and Douglas County. So we have a chairperson, a vice chairperson, a secretary who's not a member, and I currently serve as the secretary. So, and we have bylaws that are our rules for transaction of business, and then the city commission has some procedures for how to conduct meetings as well. And so not all of our boards, they should, but not all of them have bylaws, but our bylaws spell out our meeting dates, what we need to do to have special meetings, what officers are responsible for, does the chair vote, abstentions. We do have a code of ethics. We have discussed ex parte contacts and conflicts of interest. The bylaws that we have address what you're supposed to do if you perceive yourself as having a conflict of interest. So because they have 15 members in Wichita, Sedgwick County, they have subcommittees and different. So in Wichita, Sedgwick County, they have a subcommittee of the Planning Commission that reviews plats. They have a subcommittee that reviews other things. In Overland Park, they have a subcommittee that does nothing but review site plans. We've had some technical committees that have been set up to study surfacing of off-street parking. We've had advisory committees that met with county planning commissioners to discuss ideas. But when it comes back to actually taking action, those subcommittees still has to come back, and any action taken has to be done by a majority of those members present and voting. We have a budget for staff, but you guys do not have a budget and you're not getting paid. So
In spirit.
you're volunteers. So when you see our packet and we have it broken down between quasi-judicial and legislative, we have notice requirements for those, and the Kansas Supreme Court has said that if you're discussing how sand quarries or sand pits should be regulated, or if they should be regulated at all, and what the rules should be, you are acting in a legislative capacity, saying this is what we think the rules should be. And if you're taking existing rules that have been adopted and applying it to a specific location or case, then you're acting in a quasi-judicial manner. And so when you're doing that, you're acting more like judges and a jury, and listening to the evidence and then and then making findings and conclusions. And so when somebody wants to get before the Planning Commission, they need to obtain an application from the Planning Division. We encourage people to come in and meet with us to tell us what their plans are so we can direct them to the right application and understand what it is they're trying to accomplish. So we're always willing to sit down with an applicant before they submit their application. We look to see if the application is complete, whether it's clear what they're asking for, have they accurately described the property. There's nothing worse than somebody applying for a rezoning or a case like that and they don't have the full or the correct legal description for the property, which means we didn't advertise it correctly, which means we have to do it over because we didn't correctly identify what property they're seeking. So if there's things like surveys or site plans or other things that are supporting documents, we want to make sure that those happen. And then in almost every one of our cases that we have, we're sending out letters to neighboring property owners 20 days before the hearing. And so in the past, we used to make people go to a title company and get a certified list of owners. But we get the ownership list from the county's tax records, and then we send the application or the notice out. We don't necessarily have to prove, we don't send it by certified mail. We don't have to prove that they received it. We just have to show that we had the right list and we attempted to mail it based on the information that we have. So somebody, and we've had this happen, it's kind of surprising, but it does have. We have had people come to a meeting, come to the dais and speak to the commission and say that they didn't get their mailed notice. And then it's like, well, how'd you find out about today's meeting? And you're here anyway, so how were you prejudiced by not getting your letter? But we don't have to prove that they got it, just that we identified the right people and that we sent it. And we don't do it by certified return receipt. And so I think it was last year the city changed its official newspaper, which is the statute requires that we publish our notices in the official newspaper for the city, and the city declared its own website to be the official newspaper because they thought the accessibility and circulation was better than the Salina Journal circulation. So we used to publish in the Salina Journal. And so we put the date of the hearing, the place in this room, description of the property that and what the application is, and we send it to people within 200 feet or 1,000 feet if it's in the county, to the people that have a real property interest in that. And so we had that discussion. We've had that discussion with Gage, one of our planners, who lives in a loft downtown above the Blue Sky Brewery. So when we send a notice out, we send a notice to the owner of the Blue Sky Brewery building, which is Brian Richardson. Monty Shadwick is the person who owns the Blue Sky Brewery. We do not send the notice to Monty Shadwick, and we don't send the notice to the tenants who might be living upstairs. And so the notice goes to the record owner, and we rely on the record owner to share that with the tenant if it's different than the owner. But the responsibility is to send it to the owner because it would simply be too hard to try to figure out everybody else who might be involved. And then if it's a rezoning case, then we'll post a sign on the property saying this property proposed for rezoning. If you have questions, call this number. And we get quite a bit of response. These are for people who don't live within 200 feet or don't own property within 200 feet, but at least the sign gives them a heads up if they have questions. So one thing we don't do is we don't have the applicant send the mailed notice. I could see some appeal to that. I think in Manhattan, they make the applicants mail the notice, and then if it gets screwed up, it's the applicant's fault. But then I don't see how that benefits the process at all to be able to say, well, it's your fault, you didn't do the notice right. We take control of the process and just make sure that it gets out correctly, and so we take care of mailing that notice. The other thing is, and we've discussed this before, but somebody comes in and they want to have C5 zoning, and that would allow outdoor storage, and it would allow car dealerships, it would allow this or that, and the Planning Commission looks at that, and they look at the C3 shopping center district, and they think the C3 shopping center district's a better fit. The Planning Commission can simply vote to recommend giving C3 zoning instead of C5 zoning at that meeting, because it's a lesser change. If it was residential and they wanted to go to commercial, going to C3 is a lesser change than C5. So you don't have to start all over, do all new notices or anything. You can just do it at the same meeting. You can always give the applicant less than what they asked for. So if they ask for zoning for 40 apartments and you think they should only be able to build duplexes, you can recommend that they get duplex zoning and not apartment zoning. And so it doesn't require starting all over. So the chair's job is to, that's why we have the confirmation and the roll call and all those things. Have we have an item? Have we given proper legal notice of the meeting? Do we have proper legal description? Did we give the notice? And then if we can confirm all those things, then the commission has the jurisdiction to hear the case. But if we don't have a quorum, if we can't confirm to you that required notice of the meeting's been held, then we can't act on that. And so we generally move pretty fast, but if a chair calls agenda item 3.2, there should be a brief pause just to see if any members on the commission say, Mr. Chair, I think I have a conflict of interest on item 3.2, and I'm going to excuse myself and not participate. That just allows that. Or if somebody says, I didn't mean to, but I had a long conversation about this case, and I was told this, and this, and I just wanted to share that with the rest of the commission, that's an opportunity to do that. It's pretty odd and not real comfortable, but in our bylaws, it allows the Planning Commission, who might think that a member has a conflict that doesn't voluntarily declare that conflict, they can, I guess I would call it, vote them off the island. But they can, if a majority of planning commissioners feel that a member does have a conflict and shouldn't participate, they can make a motion, and if that motion passes, then that person needs to excuse themselves from the case. That should never really happen, but it's allowed for in the bylaws, and so we want to make sure that if after any members have a disqualifying interest, that there is a quorum to go ahead and proceed with today's business. You don't want to have 4 members sitting up there that feel they have a conflict and are all disqualified, and then you don't have enough left to hear the case. So I think you're familiar. It's on the back of all your packets here. There's kind of an order of how the meeting goes, and the The chair determines if the applicant or representative is present, and then staff will give you an overview. You ask any questions you have of staff. The applicant presents their case. Then we ask for public comment, pro and con. We've had cases where a neighboring property owner or concerned resident might say something and the applicant would like to get up and have an opportunity to rebut what was said. And then that opportunity is given, and it's up to the chair to actually close the public hearing and say, we're through taking public comment. Now we're going to bring it back to the commission. So you can discuss and deliberate. We list, I can count on one hand the number of closed sessions that we have, but if there's important findings to make and there's a struggle to come up with those, like we think we know what we want to do, but we're having a hard time articulating our reasons, the commission can go into a closed session and try to script out or hammer out its reasons, then come back out here and actually have the vote and then recite their reasons. That's available when you are acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. But after you discuss, we see if somebody wants to make a motion and a second and have a vote. So the important thing in a quasi-judicial is that we do the best we can to try to provide findings or reasons in our staff reports, and if you read the minutes, you'll see references commissioners make to staff's, based on staff's findings or whatever. It's our job to try to write those, and if it's a closed case, we'll try to write those on both sides of the subject so you can choose which one you think best fits. And so we try as much as possible to tell you what the facts are, what the city's adopted standards and policies are, and how the application lines up with those. And the main thing is to just assure that there's a written record of the motion and reasons and vote. So it's one way it could be viewed as overkill, but I tell my staff, and I've always written my staff reports on the assumption that the city or the planning commission can get sued on any case. And so what we have learned from those things is if there is a good written record of why the planning commission did what they did, and that staff provided them good information and they made an informed decision, that courts aren't going to second guess what planning commissions do. They're only going to look at it if they can't tell what the planning commission did or why, or if it looks like it's just arbitrary or made up. So we try to provide information in our staff reports. So we had it wasn't the planning commission, it was the Heritage Commission, and the Heritage Commission and then later the City Commission voted to deny a demolition permit for the former St. John's Hospital over on Penn and Ash. And so the Salina Regional Health Center sued the city. They sued me personally, and they asked that I be ordered to issue them a demolition permit. And when it got to court, the court reviewed it and said there is ample written record of why the city denied the permit and their reasons and the vote, and it was all done above board, and we're not going to second guess what the city decided. And so that case was dismissed because there was a good record of what had occurred and what information was provided to the decision makers. So we don't necessarily have to have formal findings of fact and conclusions you'll generally see those. There's a protest petition procedure, and we've had a few of those, and the way that works is that if 20% of the people that own property within 200 feet of a rezoning site file a protest petition, then that goes to the city commission, and they can only approve it by a majority or a unanimous or 4/5 vote. And so my example was, or an example would be in 1985, or actually the first one was 1982. There was a request to rezone property for the new Central Mall. And the Planning Commission recommended approval, and it went to the City Commission. The City Commission approved rezoning Central Mall 3-2. But there was a protest petition protesting against the mall, and so 3-2 was not sufficient to approve the zoning change. And so it was denied because they couldn't get 4 or 5 city commissioners to approve it. So, and we do try to announce for the applicant the date at which the city commission will consider, if it's a recommendation from you, and then you're done with whatever item, we move on to the next agenda item. So these are all can be pretty confusing, but I think the main thing to note, if you're amending a comprehensive plan or you're amending a body of law or you're amending the zoning or subject, that takes 5 votes. You can't, if you have 5 people present and you approve it 3-2, that is not sufficient because you're recommending changing the law, and so the vote requirement is higher to change a law than it is to just approve a plat or a zoning change. So I think that's the important thing to remember there. So again, that's the difference between changing the regulations and not. And so all of the ethics policy, the bylaws, our discussions here is just to try to have a process that's orderly, that's fundamentally fair, that's judicious and impartial. And so if we brought you an application and we got ready to do our staff report and present information, and you all said, don't bother with the staff report, we've already made up our minds, that would be an example of not having an impartial decision maker. And so it's okay if maybe you've made up your mind before you come in, but it's best to wait till the vote is had to declare that, and not say that up front that we don't need to bother with providing you with any information. So,
Dean, do we want to move to city ethics policy?
I guess, what do we have after this? Is that pretty much the end of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's. One second.
This is hard because the ethics policy is really long, and we just want to focus in on this conflict of interest part. So you're probably going to have to blow that up if you can at all. So go to the below that where it's common law, conflict of interest. So
Okay.
So the general rule is that a public officer, which a planning commission is, owes an undivided duty to the public whom he or she serves, and is not permitted to place themselves in a position that will subject them to conflicting duties or cause them to act other than for the best interest of the public. If they acquire an interest adverse to those of the public without full disclosure, it's a betrayal of trust and breach of confidence. And so it's mainly to be sure that people are acting in the public interest and not on behalf of a private interest. So if you could keep scrolling. Okay, so this is like a sliding scale here of conflicts of interest, but the most clear-cut one is when an official votes on a matter benefiting the official's own property or affording a direct financial gain. And so if you're a 33% partner in a piece of property that's being proposed for rezoning, you have a financial stake in the outcome of that rezoning, and you shouldn't participate. You should recuse yourself from that. A less clear one is you vote on a matter that financially benefits one closely tied to the official, such as an employer or family member. If I recall, and you can correct me, Mr. Mikesell, if I'm wrong, but there was a time when your wife worked for Salina Regional Health Center, and she was employed there, and you felt that as your spouse's employer, that you might be perceived as having a conflict of interest for voting on that matter, and you recused yourself. So that would be an example where there's an indirect benefit through a employer or family member. And then it gets down to a benefit to a blood relative or close friend in a non-financial way but of great importance. That's a little harder. And then where you vote on something and your judgment might be affected because of membership in some organization or desire to help that organization. So that would be an example of, I serve on the Kansas Wesleyan Board of Trustees. I'm a current trustee member, and we have an application from Kansas Wesleyan before the commission. Because of your membership on the Board of Trustees and your desire to help them, that might affect your judgment and your objectivity in that case, and in which case it might be justified to excuse yourself from participating. So I think those are the main things. I think if you keep scrolling, I think it says in there what people are. So these are resources that are available. If we have a really difficult one and I have advance notice, I have been known to call up the city attorney and say, I've got a planning commissioner with this dilemma. What do you think? Can I have your opinion? And then that is shared with the planning commissioner, and said, city attorney sees no problem with this. And so the city attorney's available if people are really stretched on trying to figure out what the right thing is to do. So keep going, see if it has the process for what you're supposed to do. So keep going. Okay. So the main thing, and this was discussed before, but if you have a conflict of interest, or you think you do, you would announce that at the start of the agenda item, following the introduction and public consideration of the matter. You'd step down from the dais and leave the meeting while that is under consideration, and refrain from advocacy regarding the matter at any time, and don't consult with any of the parties or staff or the media regarding it. You're basically out of the equation, and then when the vote's done, you come back in and rejoin the group. There's I think there have been some questions like, well, why do we need to leave the room? But there's lots of research and literature out there that says you can still influence discussion and things when you're in the room through body language, through eye contact, through other things. So the best thing is to leave the room. And so in order to give our applicants due process, it's important that, one, you don't prejudge a matter, and two, you don't engage in ex parte communications related to a matter. And so if people corner you, if people call you, if people just the best thing to do is, why don't you contact city planning staff, share your information, your concern, and they'll make sure everybody gets it. And so when people were appointed to the commission, they got a long list of, at least they've got copies of the bylaws and the ethics policy and whatever. And so, and then we don't have anybody that needs to fill out and submit a form saying they've received anything. So we've got all that done. But so the main thing is the city commission wants this information in planning commissioners' hands. They take your role seriously and rely on your recommendations and judgments, and they expect staff to fully educate and support the board members so that you don't stub your toe on something that causes a do-over or something not to go well. So that's the main point, is to make sure that every applicant, that everybody has notice of what's happening, that everybody has an opportunity to be heard, and that they can see what the vote is and reasons be provided for the vote. And by and large, you do a good job of that. And I thought if you read the minutes from the August 20th meeting, there was a lot of content in there, a lot of good discussion, a lot of reasoning for why people thought what they did. And so I think that's a pretty good example that any court or any outside party that was looking at those minutes said, well, the planning commission heard it out, they listened to everything, they studied it, and they made the best decision they could based on the information provided to them. And so that's all that we can ask. So that's long-winded, that's really in-depth, but it's something we go over with all the other boards as well, and we do that as a prelude to your annual business meeting. And so I would see if there's any questions or anything that you want staff to go back to, but you've got your roster in your packet, you've got the bylaws if you have questions about those. But if there are no questions, that would cover item 3.1, and I would turn it over to the chair for item 3.2.
Okay, our annual business meeting, election of officers. And I would throw the floor open to anyone who would like to nominate. And I guess sitting right here, I'm going to be the first and I'll be very proud to nominate Carla Waters for the chair position.
Second that.
Dean, can we do the chair and the vice chair at the same time? Or do we want them separate?
Well, I think it would be easier if we could vote on them separately.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second. Is there any more nominations? None being heard. All those in favor of Carla Waters for the chair position, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard. Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Dean, is it customary, should Carla take over the meeting at this stage?
Not till the next.
Okay.
I'll take the nominations open the floor to nominations for position of vice chair. And so everyone that's currently on the commission is eligible for the position of vice chair except for Carla, who's served 2 terms and has now been nominated to be the chair. So the floor is open for nominations.
I'm not trying to dominate the conversation here, but I would nominate Commissioner Farber for the vice chair position.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? So all those in favor of Mr. Farber filling the spot of vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So that motion carries. Then we move to the representatives to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Heritage Commission. And these appointments get confirmed by the mayor, but we try to fill this by volunteers, at least people who understand the schedule and have the time commitment to do that. Carla Waters has served as your representative on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and there's no term limits on that, so she would be eligible for another term, but any commission member is eligible if they are interested in serving on the Board of Zoning Appeals. It meets on the 3rd Thursday of each month, and it has 7 members. One of the 7 needs to be a member of the Planning Commission. So you might be able to speak to that more, Carla, but they don't meet as frequently as the Planning Commission does, and they tend to look at very property-specific situations. They're not generally big picture planning decisions. They're focused on an individual circumstance.
Correct. I don't have any more to add to that. It's pretty periodic when you meet. It's not every month. So.
Is that something you want to do again? Do you
Yeah,
enjoy that?
I
or-
would be interested, but I don't, if someone else is interested in it, I'd invite them to join because it's, again, very educational.
Do you have an example of your last meeting?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember.
Or is it more of like a historical?
No,
that's the
no,
Heritage
that-
Commission.
It was
The main
The
things
garage
is
Okay.
like a
when
garage on
when
a
you have
property.
Okay.
the main thing that the board deals with is when you have a mismatch between the regulations that the city has adopted and a plan that a property owner or applicant has. Sometimes they feel that they can't meet a required front yard setback, or sometimes they have a plan that exceeds the lot coverage that's allowed on their property, or we have a cap on residential garage sizes, and they want to demonstrate that they have a need for a bigger garage that will fit on their property. And so it's very, as I said, it's usually where there's a mismatch between a rule the city has and what an applicant is trying to do on their property.
Do you have interest?
Just know if you like to do it.
Well, I do, but I wouldn't
I'll take
invite.
that from you.
No, I'd like to, if you want to take that on, that'd be great.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to nominate Ms. Pageant for that position.
Second.
I'd second. Oh,
Wow.
Thank you.
snuck it in.
Yes.
Paget has been a motion and a second to nominate Carrie Paget to be your representative on the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Heritage Commission.
All in favor of that appointment, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that will be subject to city commission ratification. But what that means is that there could be weeks where you might have a planning commission meeting on Tuesday and a board of zoning appeals meeting on Thursday, because we meet on the third Tuesday and they meet on the third Thursday. But there's 12 months in a year, and often the board of zoning appeals might meet 6 times a year or something like that. So it's not theirs comes up more or less frequently than what planning commission cases do.
Do they send out the packet Friday or
Yeah,
prior to?
just
Okay.
yeah. So the main difference is on Friday you'll get 2 packets. One will be Board of Zoning Appeals and one will be Planning Commission. So that brings us to the Heritage Commission, which meets on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock. And they have special meetings that may be called, and that only occurs when we have an application. The most recent case that we had was there's a South Highland historic district south of Crawford, and a property owner there had a older garage, and they wanted to get a demolition permit to remove that garage and replace it with a new garage. And so being within the historic district there, their plans for demolition and replacement had to be reviewed and approved by the Heritage Commission. So that would be an example of that. And then we've had some cases, the state and federal government have historic tax credits that are available for owners that want to rehabilitate historic buildings, and so often there's a motivation for owners to seek a historic designation. So I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, Kansas Wesleyan sought to have Pioneer Hall designated as a National Register of Historic Places. In order to do that, that nomination gets reviewed by the Heritage Commission to see if the Heritage Commission agrees that the Pioneer Hall is worthy of historic designation and preservation. So those would be some examples of what the Heritage Commission deals with. And so I don't know if you have anything to add, Mr. Sydow, or what you've observed.
You did well.
Okay. So Tom currently serves as your representative, and he's eligible to serve again, or someone else wants to step forward and volunteer, that would be good as well.
What do you think?
I'll do it again, but if anybody wants to, they sure can have it.
Well, I don't think I can. My son serves on that commission, so that would be kind of frowned upon.
Nominate Tom Sydow.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a nomination for Tom Sydow to be reappointed as your representative on the Heritage Commission. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we have a new chair, a new vice chair, and Board of Zoning Appeals and Heritage Commission representatives, so you have fulfilled your duty.
Do we have any unfinished business?
Don't have any unfinished business. I would just report that just like any conditional use permit case we have on a conditional use permit, there are 2 things that could happen. Your decision is final, or a dissatisfied applicant appeals your decision, or neighbors get together and form a protest petition. It's past 5 o'clock, to the best of my knowledge. We provided information to the point that they had the option of filing an appeal of the decision that occurred at the August 20th meeting, and we have not heard anything back on that. So we don't believe that an appeal has or will be filed. And then we will meet 2 weeks from today the 17th. And the application that's coming before you, as we discussed with the Point and with other places downtown, if you want to add an outdoor dining, drinking, serving patio at an establishment downtown, that requires a conditional use permit so that the Planning Commission can review the size and the characteristics of how the patio is going to be used. In this case, we have an application. If you're familiar with I refer to it as Western Auto, but more people remember Safe Light Auto Glass at the corner of Mulberry and Santa Fe. There's a proposal to turn that into a restaurant, and they want to add an outdoor patio on the north side. So that'll be coming before this body on the 17th. And then on the 1st of October, we have an application. The Stutzman's Garden Center has lost their lease with Kansas Wesleyan at 9th and Cloud, and they're proposing to relocate out to the Central Mall. And so they'll be submitting their plan for relocation at your October 1st meeting.
Okay. Public forum.
There is nobody from the public in the room or on Zoom.
And it doesn't look like we have anybody online. I just want to share that my wife and I just returned from a trip to Scotland a couple of weeks, and there was a lot of stuff in the papers there about planning and about applications and things like that. And so the same stuff we deal with here, they deal with, but in a lot more historical setting. And boy, some of them that we were following in the news got pretty heated. So, so I guess, you know, we can look at ours and think maybe it's not so bad. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I would like to just say thank you for serving as chair over the last year. We do appreciate it, and I think you've done a tremendous job
That's
as
very
well.
professional.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
And I would be willing to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second?
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.